Welcome to today's webinar, How One Private Sector College Increased Enrollments. My name is Sarah Maskey and I'll be your moderator. Joining me is a fantastic presenter, Garth Fasano, Client Service Manager at Penn Foster. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items. Throughout the presentation, we encourage you to type questions or comments at any time during the webinar using the chat panel in the bottom right corner of the GoToWebinar player. We will leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, so if you have any questions, make sure to type them in the chat box and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. We will also ask you to take a short survey at the end of the webinar. Your feedback is very important to us, so please take a moment to answer the questions in the survey. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our featured presenter, Garth Fasano.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited you're here to join us today and talk about this case study. First, I wanted to give you a little bit of background information about the school that we're going to be talking about today and some of the challenges they were facing. So first is the school is based in Detroit. They're a career and vocational school that has been around since 1934. They have about 3,500 students across just under 10 campuses, and we've been working with 2 of the campuses initially with about 750 of their students. Over the past few years, they've been facing a couple challenges. The first was, obviously Detroit was pretty hurt in the recession, and as many of you may have experienced in the private sector industry, that was really great for enrollments. But as we were coming out of the recession, enrollments have certainly been in decline, and that has put increasing pressures on schools and their budgets. Also, Detroit in that market has historically had a very high dropout rate in high school. There have been some great things in recent years to improve that, but it's still pretty significant and represents a challenge for the communities. It's also just put a segment of the population in a very difficult place where they don't have the skills they need to advance their careers, get the training they want, and the jobs to create the opportunities that they're looking for in their lives. The third one is that over the past year, there have been changes to federal funding. Many of you may be familiar with the program Ability to Benefit. But with the elimination of this program, it has further increased the stresses on this group of the population because they don't have the ability to continue pursuing their education. As a result of these 3 factors and several others, the school has seen a large decline in enrollments and ultimately revenue. This is done as it's put increasing stresses on the school, and they're looking for a solution to help address that. So the solution that they were looking for was a high school completion program. Many schools have tried similar things. Maybe you've worked with a GED program before. But what they were really looking for was a high school program because they felt that a true high school diploma carried the full weight that employers were looking for and would allow students to carry on and pursue their education to get the skills and credentials they needed. So they had 2 main factors that they were looking for. The first was that they wanted a regionally and nationally accredited curriculum. They felt that this would validate the content and really give the students an opportunity to move on with their career goals after graduation. Second was that they were looking for a client services team, essentially a support network for them to leverage. Being a college and not in the high school business, they knew that there would be some differences from the programs that they had been running in the past, and they wanted to make sure they had the right tools and resources to get up and running. So those were really the things they were looking for, and they knew they wanted a high school program. So they landed with Penn Foster. They were looking for a regionally and nationally accredited program. Penn Foster has both of those, as well as accreditation from the Distance Education and Training Council. The program is also graduates over 12,000 students each year from the high school alone. And we work with over 100 hybrid locations around the country. What I mean by hybrid locations are places where students are coming to a physical, traditional classroom and supported by a teacher, mentor, or tutor, but the materials and classwork is really primarily taken online. And so given that we have this experience in this hybrid environment, that was also really beneficial because that was the type of program they were looking to run. We also have 600 partnerships with secondary and post-secondary schools. This is important because we've been operating at scale with business partners for a long time, and we have the tools and capabilities to support the needs of a business. What I mean by that is that there are administrator portals to help check in on student progress, and what this does is it facilitates communication internally between students, admissions, academics, and all the departments at the school. The third piece up here is the matriculation rate. Overall, from our hybrid programs, we have a 75% matriculation rate. What that means is that students who graduate from our high school program, 75% of them go on to continue their education at the school that supported them in the high school program. This is important because it means that the program is sustainable. With students matriculating and going on to the schools, they can continue to support the program, and shows that it's a success in the long term. So the results, within a few months, the school launched on 2 campuses. What that entailed was our support services team was out there working with them at a kickoff meeting. We met with their teachers, their campus presidents, their admissions officers, and what we did was we built out a process with them and supported them building a process for how to get unqualified leads and brought into the high school program, and then how we would work on transitioning them over from admissions into the high school program, keep the admissions reps in touch with the students' progress, and ultimately transition them back over so they could enroll at the college. So we were able to accomplish that pretty quickly. They came up with some great best practices, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Second on here is the 80% matriculation rate into their school. So what this means is that they're actually beating the average that I mentioned just before. So 80% of their graduates go on and matriculate at the college. This is great. They've done a bunch of fantastic things to help support this. One example is just the way that they treat their high school students like they're a student at the college. They really bring them into the community, and that's one of the best practices that they've built out there, and I'll talk about a few more examples of that coming up. Then after 3 months, they had a 10% increase in enrollments across these campuses. And we were talking about, earlier I mentioned there are 750 students across the 2 campuses, so that's pretty significant, and that helped them address the challenges we talked about earlier on. And they also have a 96% retention rate. So this means that the students who matriculate into the college programs are staying around. They've developed the characteristics for success at the college, and this retention rate is beating up their average across the school from other channels. The bottom line is that they have more students and better students. They have more better students because the Penn Foster graduates have strong attendance rates and low attrition. We'll go into a couple examples of how they've achieved this, but I think it's also important to highlight that the Penn Foster graduates that have gone on to the college have become student ambassadors. You may have a program like this at your school, but essentially what it means is that they are peer leaders. They've been recognized for their outstanding academic achievements and leadership skills, and this is really a great recognition and a good validation that the program works well and prepares students for college and to be very successful there too. So I'm going to go into the financial impact a little bit here, and I'm going to talk through each of the numbers. So the first one I want to mention is the operating profit. And what I mean by this is the incremental profit resulting from the program. We've included things like startup costs and labor costs in that. Then I'll mention the time to break even. This is just going to be the number of months to break even on investment. And this is important because when schools are thinking about investment decisions, they want to make sure that the return is going to come sooner rather than later, and often we're forced to think in quarterly or annual cycles. So this is definitely a relevant metric. Their all-in cost per start. If there are any marketing folks on the phone, this is definitely an important one. The all-in cost per student that matriculates and starts at the college. We all have to measure a business, and this is definitely one that marketing folks are focused on, so we want to share this and show you what that looks like. It's good to compare it versus your other channels. The last one is the first-year ROI on matriculated students. This may be more for the financial folks on the phone. The return on investment in the first year for students that matriculate at the college we're also including things like the attrition rate that I mentioned. All right, so here are the numbers. So the first year operating profit for the school was over $200,000. And then in year 3, that turns into $1 million. The reason that that's larger in year 3 is because they're at maturity. Early on, there are cohorts of students that have been enrolled, so there are more costs, but they haven't had time to graduate and matriculate yet. So at maturity, that's a significantly larger number. I think it's also important to point out that this is for just 2 of their campuses. They've actually rolled out to 4 more now. The time to break even, this is 7 months. This is slightly higher than our average, but it's also something that I think is well within most acceptable norms when we're evaluating investment decisions. The all-in cost per start, this one we think is really great. It's at just under $1,000. In this market, a typical cost per start is in the $2,000 to $6,000 neighborhood, depending on how well you're doing and the type of school. So this is really fantastic and significantly lower than the industry standards. We also think it's really important to point out that, for example, if your school's average cost per start is $3,000, the next start it would probably cost $3,500. So what we're showing here is a program where the next start is under $1,000, which is a really important distinguishment. And then lastly, the ROI on matriculated students, it's over 1,000%. This is a large number, but what it really goes to show is that the program is sustainable and can be maintained in the long run. All right, so there are a couple of best practices that I wanted to go through here that this school learned and developed through the process. The first is on their lead channels. What I mean about this is how they got the program up and running, where they're finding students and candidates for the program, and second, who is the ideal student. So we know you're working through ways to find students, but we want to make sure that we're bringing the right students into the program. This is important because finding the right students is going to help support things like those matriculation rates, the graduation rates, and a lot of the metrics that we care about. Third, the program structure. There are a lot of ways these programs can be set up, and this school worked through a particularly tough environment in Detroit with things like transportation challenges, and so they came up with a program structure that both worked for the students who were coming to classes, but also made sure that we still built good habits, and we'll get into that in a little bit too. Then lastly, school matriculation. This is one of the most important metrics, and there are a lot of great ways that schools are, and this school came up with to help support that and get such a great matriculation rate. So on to lead channels. First is many schools, and this school already had a list of unqualified leads that they used to work with, such as through programs such as Ability to Benefit. Then we also have had, they also maintain email lists of other unqualified leads, candidates that they may have referred to a local GED remediation center, and having access to these lists and being able to reach back out to these folks is a great way to get the program up and running initially. Then another thing to think about is outreach to local community organizations. A teacher was very involved with a local church group and was able to interact with the community there and do some great things, which was really a great benefit because she found a group that she knew that needed help and support and was able to bring those students in. Other techniques that have been used that have had great success is radio advertising. This may depend on your market, but it's something that we can talk about and would talk about in a client services support meeting. But radio advertising has been a great way to start the program off with a bang, and then also building a landing page on the school's website and doing some search engine marketing is also a great way. One of the important things to think about through the lead channel is that there's sort of a magic number of which we think is around 10, and this depends on the type of school, but once you get to about 10 students in the classroom, it's really sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Through word of mouth, students will bring in their family members. We had brothers bringing their sisters, wives bringing their husbands. We even had a daughter bringing her mother to the program. And it's really great to see that because it means that it takes even less effort from your team to keep the program running and sustained. And it's a great way to reach out into the community and find and support these folks. So on to the ideal student. So what we mentioned is that finding the right people for this program is important too. We don't want to just accept anyone and everyone. And the reason is that we want people who we are confident are going to make it through graduation and are excited and motivated to continue their careers and increase their opportunities and certainly interested in your school. So motivated students that are excited about getting their high school diploma and are excited about enrolling in a college program so that they can improve their career in life is certainly a great characteristic. Having students, often they come to the school because they've heard about the school through other marketing channels and they're interested in a college program, but they find out that they need to have a high school diploma or a GED first. So those are great candidates because we already know that they want to be at your school. We know that they want to change their life. We know that they want to get a career skill. So those are good folks to begin with. There's another great group that some states will have and others may not. And these are students that have a certificate of completion, meaning that they've taken their entire high school program, but they have failed a state exit exam, so they did not receive their high school diploma. Essentially what this means is that they have been through the entire high school curriculum. They already know all the material. They just had a really tough time with one exam and as a result didn't get their diploma. And they're sort of in this purgatory-like zone now where they don't know what their next step is. This is a great next step for them because our program, they can bring over 16 and a half transfer credits. That means they only have to take about 5 courses with Penn Foster. They can get through that pretty quickly because it's likely that they've already taken these classes before, and they'll be able to graduate and then look to move on to their next step afterwards. Another thing that a lot of schools consider is a minimum number of transfer credits. Penn Foster will evaluate their transcripts before they enroll, so you have an opportunity to make a decision with the student, an informed decision about how much time they have left and how much material they have to get through before they will graduate. I think that this is a good thing and for some schools and not so good for others. If there's a large number of students that are interested in the program, at least initially starting with a minimum number of transfer credits can be really good because you'll be able to decrease the time to break even by having students that will graduate more quickly and matriculate sooner. That being said, this school in Detroit, they couldn't even get transcripts from the public school system, so they were enrolling folks that had to take the entire program with us, and a motivated student will still get through it very quickly, and so that's okay too. All right, on to the program structure. So thinking about how you're going to run a high school class on your college campus may be a little bit daunting, but it's really not that different. This school found that having classroom sessions 3 days a week for 4 hours was best for them. Typically, we recommend 3 to 4 days a week for 3 to 5 hours, but we have some schools that run 5 days a week for 4 hours. So really the way to think about the class schedule is that this is a lever. The more attendance, or the higher the attendance requirement, the longer hours they're in the class per week, the faster the completion time will be. Students still have the ability to work on the program from home, but they get through it a lot more quickly if they have dedicated time in the classroom in front of a teacher. The other thing that this school works on is sequencing their assignments out well. And the way the Penn Foster curriculum is set up is that it is very modular, what I like to think of as bite-sized pieces of content. So you do a reading assignment and then you take a multiple choice assessment and you start quickly generating the feeling that you can succeed and you can do this. So I think that is a really important piece. However, there are 3 writing essays that they have to do during the program. And we found that students built up this routine where they were getting through the multiple choice assessments and feeling very comfortable with those, and then at the writing essays they would feel stumped. So what these teachers did was they started integrating writing work into the regular classroom. So maybe at the first 10 or 15 minutes of class they would do a quick writing assignment or start building an outline for the essay that they knew was coming up. And so it started to help prepare them and ease them into that assignment. The other thing that worked really well is that they were creating a graduation target date and a study plan. This means that the teachers were sitting down with each student every week for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, reviewing their graduation target date and looking at their study plan to make sure that they were lined up, reviewing their progress over the past week to see if they're on track, and coming up with a plan and revising it as necessary so the student could keep feeling good about the progress they were making. And this was also a great way for the teacher to identify if there were issues, concerns, and help that student along to make sure they were still marching towards their goal. Another thing that worked very well for this school was that they hosted a graduation ceremony. At first they were a little bit unsure of how this would work, but it actually turned out to be it had the highest participation out of any of their graduation events. And that's really because this is a group of the population that hasn't been recognized for their achievements before. So they brought their friends and their family, and they were very excited about it. And which, to be honest, the school was surprised about. They didn't think it would be such a good turnout, but it's one of those examples in ways that they're bringing these students into their community. They're not just a high school student that sits on their campus. It's a student at the college that happens to be in a high school program right now. And because that's the way they're looking at it, that's why they have such great matriculation rates. Some other things that they did was they created groups to work together and competing. They had some of the college's clubs integrating with students that are interested in that program of study. So they really sort of mesh the high school program with the college. Another really good piece of this is aligning the college starts with expected high school completion graduations. What I mean by that is, if there's a college start date coming up and students are close to graduating, we want to make sure that they know about it. So that's a great motivating factor for them. They're there because they want to get their diploma, they want to get some career skills so they can get a better job. Having that opportunity and that deadline coming up in front of them is something that will really help accelerate their progress too, which is great for everybody. So for school matriculation, this is what really makes the program work. It's important because if the matriculation rates are high, the program can keep going and keep running, and it's sustainable. The way that this school achieved great matriculation rates is through that total integration of the high school students into the college community. This is the way that they've integrated the lead flow and the process from admissions to the coordinator, the teacher of the program, and then back to admissions after graduation. And even saying it in that sort of process where it's first admissions, then the teacher, then back to admissions, doesn't really do it justice. It's much more integrated than that, where because of our administrative tools, the admissions team can check in on students' progress and say, when they run into them in the hall, they can say, hey, John, nice work on your last test. I saw you're doing well, and you only got a couple more assignments to go. That's great. Fantastic. Keep up the good work. So having the whole community supporting these students is really important. It's important to support the matriculation rate, and it's also great because it's not something these students really ever received before in their life. The next piece is having students meet with teachers of programs they're interested in. So this is like a class pass. If somebody's interested in the medical coding and billing class, get them in that class for a day. Make sure they know what it's all about and make sure they're getting excited about that as a career pathway. Some other things that worked well is having recent college graduates or students of the college about to graduate come in and present for maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of the class, of the high school class, about what they're doing, what their career path is, what they're excited about, what their opportunities are. And this is just sort of the total integration between the high school and the college again. Another great exercise they did was a scavenger hunt between for the students, where they had to go and meet with every department chair that month. So they had a sheet of paper, it had to get signed off by all the department chairs, and they ran around, found all the department chairs, and it was this perfect opportunity for the department heads to sit down with each student individually and say, this is what my program is about, this is what it means to be in this college program, and here's what you do when you graduate. This is what your life would be like. These are your opportunities. And that's a really great way because to educate these students who haven't been exposed to these career paths before. So it was really exciting to see that work so well. They did a really great job. And then creating a cadence for the high school program. This again is similar. It means something very similar to lining up the start dates at the college with the students graduating from the high school program. Having a smooth transition there is really helpful, so that student graduates one week, there's a start the next week that they can immediately begin in. Having them wait around for a couple weeks works, but it's obviously better if that's a much smoother transition. All right, so I wanted to talk about a couple of our student success stories, because this is really where it puts a human face to this, and I think it's important. So in the upper left is Nikita, and she has a pretty amazing story, and we were all lucky enough to get to hear it at a graduation ceremony where she was the class speaker. When she was 4 years old, she was her father passed away, and it was really tough on her family. When she was 8, her mother kicked her out of the house, and so she lived on the streets of Detroit for the next 6 years, which is something that I just can't even imagine. So truly impressive that she was able to survive and persevere, and still after that wanted to improve her life and knew what the right steps were. When she was 14, her cousin took her in, and with a little bit more stability in her life, she had the opportunity to try and think about how to pursue her education. She knew that she needed her high school diploma. She looked for a way to get it, and she found schools online, but they were too expensive and she couldn't afford it. Later on, she found this program through this college, and they were sponsoring the students enrolling. So she immediately jumped on that opportunity, and she had fantastic grades in the high school program. She graduated. She is now about to graduate from the school's culinary program. She's a student ambassador, and she's about to achieve her dream. She always wanted to be a chef, and she's going to graduate and she's going to be a chef. And this is just a fantastic way where the school has stepped in and is supporting this student and helping them achieve their goals and their dreams. And it's good for everyone. It's good for the student because the entire trajectory of her life changed because of this, where she did not have the opportunities to get a good job, improve her career, change the opportunities for herself or her family, and she's completely turned her life around. It's great for the school because they were struggling with enrollments, and here is a fantastic student who's loyal to the school and dedicated to the program and truly excited about improving her education. And it's great for Penn Foster because we get to see another student do so well, graduate from our program, and move on to a fantastic career. So it's something that we're really excited about. And lastly, it's also great for Detroit. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a city that has been completely ravaged by the economic downturn, and there are people there who want to have skilled jobs, and this is a way to help support the people who don't have the opportunity to get those kinds of jobs. Before we move off this slide, I wanted to just share with you one of the quotes here on the upper right. And this woman said, I didn't have much self-worth because I was uneducated and had no hope it would change until I realized that you don't stop at one door that closes. You go on to the next one. And that's what this college is, an open door for me. And now I'm almost finished, and my kids are proud of me, and I couldn't be happier. This is just another person whose entire life trajectory was changed, and it's fantastic. So there are a couple key takeaways that I hope you've gotten from this. The first is that there are important characteristics of a high school program if you're running them on your campus. And we mentioned two of those today. The first was the regional and national accreditation, so that the program has the significance for employers and colleges, and also the right kind of support team to make sure it's implemented well and it's successful on your campus. The next thing is that there is a process flow that's very important about how to implement this and how to manage bringing students into the program so that you have the outcomes you want. Third, we need to set expectations for the program's results. This program does very well. I hope you've gotten a taste of that here today. And it has a great impact on the schools. And so I hope you guys have understood a bit about that. Next, we've shared a couple of best practices that this school found out. There are a lot of other great things that schools are doing, and I hope you got a glimpse into some of the ways that really kind of turbocharge a high school program on your campus. And then we've talked about a couple of students and how it's really changed their lives and can change this community, and I think that's another important takeaway.
Thanks, Garth. We've received some really exciting stuff, some good questions, and I just want to remind the attendees that if you have any questions you'd like to ask Garth, make sure to type them in the chat box in the bottom right corner. While people are taking a moment to write in their questions, I want to mention that we're currently offering a free ROI consultation. This is an exclusive offer to the attendees of this webinar. The consultation will give you a better understanding of the high school program's financial impact for your school. So please take advantage of this limited time offer and contact us using the information you see on the screen. All right, so we've received some good questions. The first question we have is around implementation. How did the school implement this program, and what did their process look like?
So that's a good question. Implementation is really what I think is the funnest part of this, because each school is a little bit different, but we have a client services team here, and they come on site. They meet with the executive sponsor, they meet with the campus presidents, the directors of admission, and the coordinators or teachers for the program. And we work on building out a process flow. Often we're talking about detailed things like your campus view, lead IDs, coding them correctly, and we build the process so that it will work for your existing setup. Something that is always important is directors of admissions want to make sure that these leads aren't hurting their reps' numbers, and those are things we will work through to make sure that it works well for everyone. So we come on site, we have a kickoff meeting, we talk about some of these things, and we build out a plan for the launch. We'll support your team and help share with you these best practices to make sure it works best for you.
Great. On the financial impact slide, you'd mentioned the school's cost per start. Is this typical of the other schools you work with?
So this school has done very well. They have a lower cost per start than average. This is because they've done great work around school matriculation. So it's accessible to everyone, but they are below the average. I think it's also important to point out that the average across all of our clients is considerably lower than the common average in the industry for the cost per start through traditional marketing channels.
Great. And what were some of the challenges the school faced when they were trying to get up and running?
So one of the biggest challenges that they didn't anticipate was the sort of nuances in the Detroit marketplace. And the first there is that they couldn't find transcripts from the local school system. Often the schools were not responsive to their request for transcripts, which is important when they're trying to get transfer credits, identify how much more work the student has to do. And ultimately what they realized was that it was faster to have the students start working through the program, even if they had already done the courses before. But because they had already had that background and experience and exposure, they were able to move through more quickly than waiting for the public school system. Another example of that is the local transportation network was not reliable enough to get students to school. So they had to find other ways. So this is where they adopted that attendance schedule. They also would work with students. So if the bus didn't show up, they could work from home, and the teachers could check in on the administrator portal to make sure that they were doing work and continuing to progress.
Great. And another question we just received, what age group is eligible for a diploma?
So Penn Foster works with all age groups. We have adult learners. Typically with this program, we have people who are of college age, so that they're good candidates for your school. But there are, I don't believe there are age restrictions.
Great. And the last question that we have time for is, where are the students learning? So I'm a little confused about the online and class experience. Can you just explain that a bit more?
Sure. This is, a really good question because this is a unique learning environment, and I know people throw around this word hybrid a lot today, and I think it's definitely worth explaining a little bit more. So the students come into a classroom on the campus, and they're supported by a teacher or a tutor. This may be somebody that the school has hired, or it could be an adjunct professor that's looking for some extra hours. There are certainly important characteristics to consider when looking for this person, and those are one of the things that we work on our implementation. The students are coming into a classroom on campus. They are taking the coursework online. They also have textbooks in the classroom that they can use, and they can sign them out of the classroom and take them home if they need. So the coursework is online. The learning materials are both print-based and available online, so they can study in the classroom. They can also study when they go home. Their assessments are all online as well. So it's online curriculum and content supported by a traditional ground-based network. The students, however, also have access to Penn Foster teachers. So if they're at home, there are online resources, and there are people available to help them with their questions.
Great. Awesome answers. So that's all the time we have for today. If you have any questions that we did not answer, contact us using the information you see on the screen. We will be sending out a copy of the slides, so everyone keep an eye out for that email. And as a reminder, please take a moment to fill out the 5-question survey we will ask you when you close out the webinar. On behalf of Garth Fasano and the rest of the Penn Foster team, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.